Proper confession. Why is it that sometimes, even though our conscience is censuring us, we do not undertake the necessary struggle to correct ourselves? This can happen because of some trauma of the soul. When someone is panic-stricken by a temptation, he wants to struggle, but feels paralyzed, or too weak to resist. He lacks the willpower, the inner power of the soul. That's when he must seek confession in order to find inner peace. With confession, one is consoled, revivified, and by the grace of God draws the strength to return to the battle. If one does not put his spiritual life in order, he may be attacked with even more temptations, and despondent as he already is, may become even more broken in spirit and feel overwhelmed by thoughts. He despairs and feels unable to struggle at all. What if this happens often? If this happens often, one must often seek refuge in confession. By opening his heart to the spiritual Father and receiving encouragement. And once he found peace within his soul, he must let the engine run. He must struggle vigorously with Philorimo in order to put the devil to flight. Geronda. What is going on when I feel I don't need confession? Could it be that you are not carefully observing your inner life? Confession is a mystery. You should go and simply tell your sins. After all, what do you think of yourself? Have you no stubbornness? Have you no egoism? Don't you hurt your sister's feelings? Don't you criticize? What do you suppose I go to confess? I got angry, I criticized, and the priest reads the prayer of forgiveness. But even the small sins have their own collective weight themselves. When I used to go to Father Tychon for confession, I wouldn't have anything serious to confess, and he would advise me. There is sand, my son, there is sand. The little sins accumulate and add up to make a sand dune that is heavier than any single big stone. Someone who has committed one big sin thinks of it all the time, repents and is humbled. You have a myriad of small sins, but if you examine the conditions under which you were raised, and the conditions under which the other person was raised, you will see that you are worse off spiritually than the other person. You must also try to be specific in your confession. It is not enough to simply say, for example, I am jealous, I get angry, and so on. But you should relate the actual and specific sin in order to be helped. And when it is a very serious sin, such as cunning, you must give details of how you thought and how you actually acted. Otherwise, you are merely trying to mock Christ. When a person does not confess the truth to the spiritual Father, who therefore in turn cannot point out his error to help him, he ends up being harmed all the more, in the same way as the patient who hides his symptoms and his disease from the doctor. Whereas when the penitent opens himself honestly as he really is, then the spiritual Father can get to know him better and help him more effectively and positively. Also, when someone has been unjust or has injured some other person with his behavior, he must first go to that person and ask humbly for forgiveness, reconciliation, and then go to confess his fault to the spiritual Father and receive remission for his sin. This is how the grace of God comes to us. If one confesses his sin to the spiritual Father without first having asked for forgiveness from the injured person, he cannot find peace in his soul because he has not yet humbled himself. An exception can be made when the injured person has died or cannot be located because he has changed his residence and there is no address available to ask, even in writing for forgiveness. But if he has the desire, every good intention of doing this, then God will recognize this and forgive him. Geronda. What happens when we ask someone for forgiveness and are not forgiven? Then we must pray for God to soften the heart of the injured person. But there is also the possibility that God has not softened the injured person's heart, because should we be forgiven, we may just as carelessly fall into the same sin. Geronda, when someone falls into a serious sin, is there a possibility that he may not be able to confess it immediately? Why should he put it off? To let it turn even more sore. The longer you keep something spoiled, the more it spoils. Why allow 2 or 3 months to pass before going to the spiritual father to confess it? The sooner one goes, the better. If you have an open wound, will you let a month go by before tending to it? Nor should one wait to go until the spiritual father has more time, to be more at ease. That one serious sin should be confessed immediately. And then when the spiritual father has more time, the person can go back again for a longer visit, for a more detailed talk. It doesn't take long to provide my spiritual father with a picture of myself. When the conscience is working correctly, a person can give a true picture of himself in a few words. But when there is confusion in his soul, he can say a lot without ever revealing an image of himself. For instance, I see some people who write whole notebooks, a 20 or 30 page report written in small letters and several pages of postscripts, all of which could have been put down on just one page.